Good evening, everyone. We always precede each council meeting with a word of prayer and a pledge of allegiance. If you would like, please feel free to join us. Would you bow with me, please? We thank you, Lord God, for your goodness, your grace, your mercy, and your power. We thank you, Lord, for this city, and we pray for all the decisions that are made tonight, that they will bring honor and glory to your name. For it's in your name we pray. Amen.
Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America, and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Now call this meeting to order. Mr. Garrett, would you call the roll, please?
Mr. Hawkins? Here. Mr. Grimes?
Here.
Mr. Pruitt? Here. Miss Mel? Here. Mr. Ledbetter? Here. Miss Smith?
Here.
Mr. Jones? Here. Mrs.
Here.
All right. I noticed Miss Lampkin Stevens' class from UCA is here tonight, her journalism class. This shirt right here, the reason I'm wearing this Bears is I lost a bet to the Jonesboro mayor. And he was going to have to wear a UCA shirt had UCA won the football game, and likewise I had to wear a SU shirt. So I'm paying my debt to say. But I'm a loyal Bears fan. I will never wear a Cowboy shirt. Never. First on the agenda tonight is our monthly financial report that ended August 31st, and Mr. Winningham is with us tonight to give you the highlights.
Good evening, everybody. Sales tax continues to be the little engine that could. We were up just under 12%, 11 3/4 to be exact, over the same month last year. Year to date, we're up about 14%. In dollars to the general fund, that's about $2 million. So that's great. Overall, sales tax is up a little over $3 million, but we have those other portions of it that go to other funds. I'd also point out our permits. We've already met our budget number in permits, so building continues to be strong in the city. And I'd also point out parks revenue. We're ahead of budget there, so it looks like maybe we've rebounded from last year. I don't know specifics on programs and whatnot, which programs were able to happen and which ones maybe didn't, but as far as revenue goes, we've done well there. So you can see our bottom line in the general fund looks really good. $2.3 million net revenue as of the end of August. The only other thing I'd point out is back in the airport fund on the balance sheet, we now have a line item for fuel inventory. So each month you'll be able to see the dollar amount of fuel on hand in the tanks out there at the airport. And we did that to kind of clean up our books relative to the fuel vendor. That's all I have, Mayor.
Council, any questions? That's sales tax is looking good, but like everything else, it can change. But
Could change quickly.
So far, it's really done well for us.
Yeah.
Make a motion to approve the monthly financials.
Second.
I have a motion and a second to approve the monthly financials for August, ending August 31st. Any further discussion?
We had a bunch of money in the street sales tax.
Yes, sir.
Mr. Garrett, I'm sorry.
Mayor and Finley know more about that than
Yeah.
I do. I think we're going to use it to match some state grants.
It's just to match some grants, and we also have money in there to purchase the property on Harkrider South.
No, sir. He's talking about the 3/8 cent, I believe.
Oh, yeah.
Talking about the special fund, the very last page. Yeah.
Finley, would you like to address that?
I didn't even know Finley was here.
Yes, sir, Mr. Hawkins. $7 million of that is dedicated to the state for Dave Ward and Harkrider, and then another $3 to $4 million is the remainder of Donaghy Avenue.
That's all.
$3 to $4 million for the second phase of the Donaghy Avenue project. The first phase is
just looked like a big number.
It's a huge number, yeah, but you know, the majority of that is dedicated to future state projects. Yes, sir.
We got somewhere to spend it. Mr. Garrett.
All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
All opposed.
Passes 8-0. Before we move on to the community development, got a couple of letters. Do what? Yeah. Yeah.
We didn't do the minutes.
All right, what did I do? Get off track here? All right, well, let's back up. Okay, I did get a motion to approve the minutes as submitted, did we not?
No.
All right, well, I'll take a motion.
So, second.
Thank you. We have a motion and a second to approve the minutes. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Passes 8-0. Thank you, Mr. Garrett. I got a little ahead of myself. I saw these 2 letters here. Before we get to community development, this is the subject is an attaboy phone call. And it's from Linda White from our sanitation department. Said, I'm not sure if that's the right term for this phone call. I just received from Mike Binko at number 1 Meta Vista Drive Lane. He wanted to take an opportunity to let us know what a terrific job that you do in this city. Speaking of the sanitation department. You provide a great service and is greatly appreciated. And he stated you guys are always so professional and courteous. He sees you all go by and waves and someone always waves back. He went on and on. I told him that it was very much appreciated for him for taking his time out of his day to brag on our guys. Please let your drivers know they are appreciated. And then another one says, afternoon around 1 p.m., a gentleman named Jimmy Reynolds stopped by the office and asked to speak to someone in charge. He said that he'd just come from a wall area, and while he was down there, his phone accidentally fell into one of the bins. He said that an angel of a woman fished my phone out of that big container, and I want to let y'all know what a jewel she is. What a jewel she is. So I'm letting you fellow know that we have a jewel out here. So that's what you want to hear. I mean, we have some tremendous employees in the city that do a great job. Next up, we have community development. Mr. Hawkins, we'll turn this over to you.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. First item here is an ordinance accepting and appropriating grant funds from the Federal Aviation Administration for Conway Regional Airport, and we have an ordinance to read for this item. It's ordinance 021-100.
Make a motion to waive 3 readings.
Second.
I have a motion and a second to waive the 3 readings. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Passes 8-0. Mr. Bell. I see you grinning back there. I know you want to talk.
I'll take any questions. This is a little grant we got from the Rescue Act, I guess, through the FAA. This is a grant we don't have to apply for. They just say you got a grant. They fill out the form for you. Mayor signs it, we send it in, and then it's a reimbursable grant, so we spend the money and they reimburse us, and now we want to put it back in the line items it came out of.
And the reason I asked you to come up and speak, Jay, the council knows what it's about, but it's for the folks in the audience and the people that are on TV and watching on YouTube. They always want to know what does that mean. So thank you for explaining that.
Well, I know it's a treat to see me on TV.
Yeah, we get requests all the time. See Jack Bell.
I make a motion for adoption.
Second.
I have a motion and a second to adopt this ordinance. Any further discussion? Mr. Garrett.
Mr. Hawkins?
Yes.
Mr. Pruitt? Aye. Ms. Smith?
Yes.
Ms. Mel?
Aye.
Ms. Isby?
Yes.
Mr. Jones?
Yes.
Mr. Grimes?
Aye.
And Mr. Ledbetter?
Yes.
Passes 8-0. Mr. Hawkins.
Next item, Mr. Mayor, is a resolution to apply for an Economic Development Administration grant for the Transportation Department. And usually when I talk about Transportation Department, somebody else other than you shows up.
Finley ain't
Hello,
doing too
James.
well.
I don't know if you could tell by Finley when he came up to speak. Finley and his family have been a little under the weather, and I felt kind of bad for him even being here tonight. If you'll notice, he's got his head leaned back against the wall over there. We may have to drive him home.
You're not near far enough away as far as I'm concerned.
He does not have COVID. We know that. So
Okay.
thank you for being here tonight, Finley.
This is for application EDA grant on 2 projects. The first of which is the Kinley Trail extension. So I think you all may be aware, or have had some discussion, that is extending the Tucker Creek Trail or Kinley Trail to the southwest out past Walmart down towards the soccer complex in that area. The other is, and I will get made fun of for this, the Garland Willow Street Wooner project. That is the shared street project that we have contracted with McClellan to design, that is essentially an extension of the park space around MLK Square to the north and to the south. It'll still be accessible by street, but it's meant to be an area where essentially there's an extension of that park space. So this is for these two grant projects. And any questions you have?
Well, we've got riders in the crowd tonight. I need you to spell wonderful.
Yeah, well, yeah.
Wonderful.
Woodruff.
Woodruff. I don't know.
You start like you're calling the hogs with the woo, and then nerf like you're shooting a gun. So
Woo nerf.
woo nerf.
That sounds like a street director or a planning director's term.
There might be a former mayor that likes that term. So
Bingo.
I make a motion for adoption of the resolution. Second.
Have a motion and a second to approve this resolution for an EDA grant for the Transportation Department. Any further discussion or questions? Mr. Garrett.
This be resolution R2177. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
All opposed.
Passes 8-0. Mr. Hawkins.
Next item, Mr. Mayor, is a resolution to approve professional services for the Oak Street Corridor Study for the Transportation Department. I know James is going to be there again, and there he is.
yes, so this is the Oak Street Corridor Study. If y'all remember back to the council retreat, we talked about this at that time, about a study to look at Oak Street for redevelopment. It's a combination of integrated transportation and land use study, very similar to what has been done recently on the 71B corridor in Fayetteville. And actually, we have Dustin Tackett and Juliet Ritchie here from Garver to answer any questions that you have. They're actually the same firm that worked on that study. We thought it was they did such a great job. We said, well, why don't we hire them? And so they're here to answer questions on that. They're also partnering with RDG, which is a planning firm out of the Midwest. I'll be working on that. They were part of that team as well. The point of the study is, again, to look at transportation and land use. So part of this, a very important part of this study, is projecting the future transportation needs there and coordination with RDOT. And so that is one of the biggest reasons why we're going out for this project. Anytime that we have something that touches RDOT, we want to have an external consultant handle that, because that's typically what RDOT expects. So.
Is this something that we can just award to somebody? We don't have to put this out to bid? No dissing anybody in the room, but I just want to make sure that we're doing what.
Yeah, they're selected off the on-call.
Okay.
So we recently put out an on-call for engineering and planning projects, and this would be an additional task order to what they're working on. So.
Thank you. I just needed that clarified.
Are we planning a roundabout there, or what?
You know, that will be something to examine and look at. One of the things that they'll do is look at the existing and future traffic impacts that will be coordinated with sort of the redevelopment plan for that. So it'd also look at access management, how we intend to do that. I think there were a lot of lessons that we learned as a community from the time that we developed Oak Street to the time that we have developed Dave Ward Drive. And now I think there's even lessons that we can apply from what we saw on Dave Ward Drive, and then apply that to the redevelopment of Oak Street. And that's really what it's going to be about. It's about looking at the land use and the transportation all in one. So.
Okay.
James, help me with where Hart Lane is. Is that out past the
It's out past the Expo Center.
Expo Center? Mm-hmm. Cool. Because I'm going to tell you what, there's some afternoons that stretch east of the interstate is
it's
awful.
terrible.
It's
yeah, we
just awful. So
talked about
anything we can
Yeah,
do
most days. And
Most-
Friday is just
all day.
crushed.
Friday, my office is out that way. I don't even think about it. I find another way.
So, but if y'all have any questions for the consultants, be more than happy to. They'd be happy to come up or anything along those lines. So,
I make a motion for adoption. Second.
Have a motion and a second to approve this resolution for services for the Oak Street Corridor Study for the Transportation Department. Any further discussion?
Can I ask Dustin a question?
Sure.
Very good. Do you mind? Thank you. I appreciate it. You said y'all worked on one of these in Fayetteville. Somebody worked on one. Come on up.
I'm the Conway representative, but Juliet did personally work on the job in Fayetteville, so
Yes,
just
sir.
in
Welcome.
case there's a question.
Welcome. Is it done or is it just in the planning stage?
No, the study's complete and actually, it wrapped up in 2019 and we're working now, on the first phase of implementation.
Very good.
Yes, sir.
Very good. And somewhere in here I saw some drawings. Here they are. Yeah,
Yes.
this is for the Fayetteville. So it's gonna have, it'll have a islands in the middle to help traffic move around properly.
Well, I think that'll be to be determined.
Okay.
Would one of the things you're gonna be looking at, helping people get in and out of the expo center a little easier? Because coming out, there's only one way in and one way out. And I know that's been an issue too.
We've actually worked with Jim Baker on that, trying to get some property owners to sell us some right of way so we bring a second exit out of there, and no one's really been interested in it.
But it will look at access management, and the goal would be to develop a typical section of what Oak Street would look like to implement going forward, and that would be what you use as a template, what you take to RDOT in conversation to make sure they're acceptable to that. But it very well could have an island, but that's to be determined.
Time frame on the planning for this is how long?
It's approximately 10 months.
Yeah.
Is the,
Okay. I volunteer everything east of the interstate to be worked on first. Is that okay? Is that okay? Is that okay with 2 and 4? Okay. Just checking. That's all I have.
Mr. Garrett.
The resolution R2178, all in favor say aye.
Aye.
All opposed.
Passes 8-0. Thanks, Dustin. I'm sorry I didn't catch your name. Thank you for being here. That's a pretty good drive.
Julia.
Not as bad as it used to be, is it? Well, welcome to Conway. Mr. Hawkins.
Next item, Mr. Mayor, is an ordinance appropriating funds from govdeals.com for the Transportation Department. And we have an ordinance to read for this item. It's ordinance 021-101.
Make a motion that we waive the 3 readings.
Second.
We have a motion and a second to waive 3 readings. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Finley, are you going to speak to this, or is James?
I think it's just budgetary.
That's
Okay.
all it is.
But
McCown.
same thing, just so the folks at home will know, just a brief description. Don't breathe into the mic.
We just have sold enough stuff in recent months that we've got enough money to. It was worth passing an ordinance so we could do something with it.
Okay.
I make a motion for adoption of the ordinance.
We have a motion and a second to adopt this ordinance. All in favor? I'm sorry. Any further discussion? Mr. Garrett.
Ms. Isby?
Yes.
Mr. Grimes? Aye. Ms. Mel?
Aye.
Mr. Jones?
Yes.
Mr. Hawkins?
Yes.
Mr. Ledbetter? Yes. Ms. Smith?
Yes.
Mr. Pruitt?
Passes 8-0. Mr. Hawkins.
Next item, Mr. Mayor, is an ordinance authorizing the addition of an additional personnel position for the Transportation Department. Finley?
Yes, sir. Thank you. We actually lost our mechanic before COVID. He retired, and we have a gentleman who's been doing all the duties of a mechanic since then. Has been doing a very good job. We advertised for a mechanic for quite some time and couldn't get anybody qualified to apply. This guy is essentially doing the job, and I would like to promote him to the position of mechanic. The previous mechanic had a title of shop foreman, which is kind of an antiquated title. So this ordinance uses the title, one of the heavy equipment mechanic titles that the sanitation department created, I think, a year or 2 ago, and I'd like to use that title to give this guy the pay that he deserves.
I make a motion to waive 3 readings.
I have a motion. We did that. I'm off. I have a motion and a second to waive the 3 readings. All in favor say aye. Aye. Any opposed? Passes 8-0.
That's what I was going to say. Thank you,
Motion
Wes.
for the adoption of the ordinance and the emergency.
Second.
I have a motion and a second to adopt the ordinance with the emergency clause. Any further discussion?
Yeah, I got it.
I'm sorry, I got a question. Yes, sir. How much difference is the salary? Is gonna be the same or what?
From what the gentleman was making before and what he's making now? Oh, man, I don't recall exactly.
You just ballpark, man. I know you're not feeling good. Just
I think it's probably 4,000,
that's
something
great.
like that.
I'm sorry, I forgot.
No, it's okay.
I'm sorry. I'll leave you alone.
You're fine.
Mr.
Yeah,
yes,
go. That's what I
Mr.
say.
Garrett.
Go home.
Ordinance 021-102, Ms. Smith,
Yes.
Mr. Hawkins.
Yes.
Mr. Grimes.
Aye.
Mr. Pruitt. Aye. Ms. Mel.
Aye.
Ms. Isby.
Yes.
Mr. Ledbetter.
Yes.
Mr. Jones.
Yes.
And the emergency clause, Ms. Smith.
Yes.
Mr. Hawkins.
Yes.
Mr. Grimes.
Aye.
Mr. Pruitt. Aye. Ms. Mel.
Aye.
Ms. Isby.
Yes.
Mr. Ledbetter.
Yes.
Mr. Jones.
Yes.
Both of those pass 8-0. Thank you, Finley, for being here.
Thank you.
Go home, take care of yourself and your family. Mr. Hawkins.
Next item, Mr. Mayor, is consideration to approve the nomination of Canton Ford for the tree board. This is to fill a vacancy because of the resignation of one of the tree board members. This has been forwarded to us by Rhiannon Botsford Barber, who is the 2021 tree board chairperson. And I move that we accept this nomination for the tree board.
Second.
Have a motion and a second to approve this, the nomination of Canton Board to the tree board, Canton Ford to the tree board with a term ending on December 31st, 2021. Any further discussion? Mr. Garrett.
All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
All opposed.
Passes 8-0. Mr. Hawkins.
Next item, Mr. Mayor, is a request for a conditional use permit to allow a bank in an O2 zoning district for property at 841 Donaghy Avenue. This was reviewed by the Planning Commission. I'm looking for the date of the meeting, and I'm not seeing it, but it was recommended that this be forwarded to us with an approval. 7 in favor, 0 against, 1 abstention, and James?
It's kind of this is a weird situation in that it's actually a mortgage company, so it's not sort of a typical bank. That is required to be a conditional use in that O2 zone. It's at Linderman Dental, which is that new structure that's at the corner of Western and Donaghy. It actually was a situation where they leased the property and then we found out and we're like, well, no, that's a zoning violation. So we've gone through this process to correct it. I think normally the reason that there would be a conditional use for a bank in that location is probably because of a drive-through, but that's not a factor that is a part of the equation with this particular use. Banks, they'll go in, higher intensity office or commercial zones. Yeah. But it is an extremely quiet use. So
I make a motion to grant this conditional use.
Second.
I have a motion and a second to approve this request for conditional use permit for the property located at 841 Donaghy Avenue. Any further discussion? Mr. Garrett.
All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
All opposed.
Passes 8-0. Mr. Hawkins.
Next item, Mr. Mayor, is an ordinance to rezone property at 517 5th Street from R2A to R2. And for the folks out in the audience, James, tell us what the difference is.
yeah, I'll go ahead and make his diseased ears go.
I let it clear the area too.
Yes, so this is on the east side of Harkrider property. It is previously a location where through HDC a house, single-family house construction was permitted. The applicants in that situation, due to rising housing costs, construction costs, decided not to build on the lot. With the difference between R2 and R2A, R2 it's currently zoned R2A. R2A is designed with an intent of allowing duplexes, but only duplexes when you have very large lots. And so the intent is for it to be sort of a district that is predominantly single family with an occasional duplex mixed in. In this area, they're trying to zone it R2. The reasoning behind that is they're short on the lot area. They would also need several variances when you're looking at the R2A zoning to be able to accommodate construction of a duplex on that lot. So that's sort of the intent of why the applicant is seeking that in this location.
Who's our applicant? I heard someone.
Would you have a question for him?
No.
Mr. Hawkins? Okay, council, it's back to you.
I'll make a motion to waive the 3 readings.
Second.
I have a motion and a second to waive the 3 readings. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Passes 8-0.
I make a motion for adoption.
Second.
I have a motion and a second to adopt this ordinance to rezone the property located at 517 Fifth Street from R2A to R2. Any further discussion?
Well, as I've stated before, I'm not a big fan of doing this. The R2A was put in for a reason, to keep duplexes out of these older areas. And, you know, one by one, variance by variance, they go back in. And so, just not something I don't think I can support.
Thank you, Mr. Grimes. Mr. Garrett?
This will be ordinance O-21-103. Mr. Pruitt? Aye. Mr. Ledbetter?
Yes.
Mr. Grimes?
No.
Ms. Mel?
Aye.
Ms. Smith?
Yes.
Mr. Jones?
Yes.
Mr. Hawkins?
No.
Ms. Isby?
Yes.
Passes 6-2. Mr. Hawkins?
Next item, Mr. Mayor, is an ordinance to rezone 55 acres of land located at East Dave Ward Drive and Thomas G. Wilson Drive. It presently is zoned A1 and C3. The requested zoning is for a PUD. And James, would you like to tell us about this one? By the way, this was reviewed by the Planning
all know
Commission,
about it.
and at that time, they voted 8-0 to forward this to, with the recommendation for approval.
Why don't you just,
High notice.
I know the council, just give the folks at home kind of a briefing, and then if the council has any questions, they'll ask you.
Absolutely. So this is basically a 55-acre tract that they're intending to develop as a multiple and mixed-use development. It would include a variety of uses, including 2 hotel lots, multifamily, restaurant and retail, an entertainment center, an event center, gas station, sort of strip commercial. So there's sort of a wide variety of uses, including some flexibility for hopefully mixed use, upper story mixed use on some of the retail structures or restaurant structures as well. Staff came up with approximately 12 conditions in reviewing this item. Subsequent to the review by the Planning Commission, staff met with the applicant. They had 3 additional conditions that they wanted to add. Those 3 conditions staff concurs with. So those conditions are that uses on each lot and any subsequent future subdivision of those lots, except Lot 1, would be restricted to uses permitted by right in A1 until a building permit is obtained for construction of a structure on the lot consistent with the provisions of this PUD. That is a very long-winded way of saying that their use basically stays A1 and agricultural until they develop it. And that is for the benefit for the property owner on taxes, so that they're not taxed at a full commercial rate until they actually develop it. The second condition, lots 2A through D and 3A through D, and any subsequent future subdivision of those lots would have a maximum building height of 45 feet. So there was a condition in there for 35. Staff has no problem with the extra 10 feet on that. This is going to be a very high intensity development. Would be, add uses that are not currently present in the city. So I think, accommodations on that are more than reasonable. The third condition is lots 2B, 2C, and 3C, and any subsequent future subdivision of those lots would additionally allow mixed-use commercial and residential with upper story residential at a maximum density of 18 units per acre. So that is on those areas where they're proposing sort of a promenade with commercial restaurant retail, that they could do upper story retail, upper story residential that would sort of help activate and enliven that area as well. So, any questions?
The applicant is okay with all of this?
Who's gonna take the seat?
Would you state your name and,
Yes, Eric Holloway with Holloway Engineering. I'm the civil consultant for the owner on this project. Yes, we talked with staff today and certainly concur with the new conditions and the previous conditions as they're written. Also, if I can, I would just like to take the opportunity. This is a large project. It's something that took a lot of back and forth for the last year. So I really want to commend your planning staff, your public works staff, for helping us through and guiding us through the process. It's tough. I do this several states, all over this state, and this is you guys got some good people here in Conway.
Thank you.
Including him?
Yeah.
I'm just checking. Okay.
James, I do have a question. In your notes in the planning department or the planning meeting, you know that the applicant's proposed design standards deviate significantly from the city's commercial design standards. That troubles me somewhat. Are we opening up ourselves to a lot more of this?
The main way in that deviation is with the taking the masonry requirement from 50% to 25% on this particular project. Initially, the applicant, I think, had a big problem with adding that amount of brick. There's additionally in the residential area, it would fully comply with those masonry requirements. So I think from a perspective of maintaining consistency throughout the development, that probably is a reasonable concession in that.
I think 51% is pretty standard too. If you apply it everywhere, it's consistent as well. I just don't know why we want to deviate on this. I mean, get ready for request after request after request to go away from the standards we worked so hard to put in.
And if we do one, that's all it takes.
I think Lewis Crossing right across the street did it the way it was asked.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm not really in favor of doing that.
Excuse me, the planning in these notes.
I guess to remedy that, I move to amend the conditions to require the adherence to our design requirements.
Does that just change that?
We hadn't made a motion yet.
Yeah, he made a motion
What?
to amend that one, make stipulation on that one section that it meets the city's design requirements.
Okay.
Or what's the,
I got a question.
number 8?
I got a question. If they had agreed on this other one, it's just like what we did for Frank. Does it need to go back for discussion, or are they just gonna be able to agree on it now, or what? See what I'm saying? Since the other plan was what the builder had agreed on, and the planning commission had agreed on.
This is I think, although it probably is certainly not minor to the applicant, in the overall scheme of the zoning within this particular location, I don't think that's something that would rise to the level of sending it back to the planning commission.
Now, what I'm saying, are they gonna be okay with it, the guys?
Oh, well, I can't speak for
That's
them.
what I'm saying, since this wasn't brought up, up at the planning commission meeting, that's what I'm saying. That's the only thing I'm saying, since this other thing was voted on it, and they agreed on that one.
Yeah.
And that's what I'm saying.
What was
now.
the discussion at the planning commission meeting, James? What did they talk about that in particular and how it deviated from the
Were they worried
current
about
standard?
that?
There was some concern about that. There was.
But
What are your thoughts?
Boy, that's a tough place to be in.
Well, just
my
as a
thought
planning
is,
director, what is?
my thought is that you all as policymakers kind of decide those things, and my job is really to carry it out and enforce it. So
your thought was yes.
Good to step around.
Yeah, exactly. Danced around that one.
Well, I don't know if it's fair to ask James.
that's why I'm on this side of the table and not that side of the table.
This is a PUD, is it not?
It is a planned unit development.
And in the PUD process, that allows us some leeway in doing some things differently than we normally would do, does that not?
It does.
I was going to hold this conversation until after this vote, but David, I think you were on here when we did work very hard to get these rules changed. And at the time, the intention of what we did at the time, there was a proliferation of metal buildings that were going up in this community. And that was the intent, David, was to put the brakes on that. Construction materials and what they look like now and the quality of them have changed in the 20 years since we did all of this. And I think at some point in time, James, we need to start looking at changing our rules regarding requirement of builders to put certain items on the exteriors of their buildings, because it's not the same world that it was in 2000. It just isn't.
I don't disagree with that. But I'd say if we pass this as is tonight, we've essentially done that without really discussing the merits of it and hashing it out really fully as to what might or might not be acceptable. And you're right, 20 years ago, proliferation of metal buildings was the beginning of this, but it wasn't the end and the only reason to do that. We could have just eliminated metal siding, but we chose to do 51% masonry on each side. And there's a reason, and people have adhered to it for a long, long time, and I think it's served us well, and I'm not ready just to scrap it in one night.
I understand your point, but I do also understand that there have been challenges to rules that we have in place in states that border our state, and they have been shot down one after the other. And so I'm just
that. All I know is in front of me tonight.
Okay, I can remember when we put the rule in place, and I can tell you exactly what, as far as it was, some people was building metal buildings, and then they were leaving, and it was an eyesore that nobody wanted.
Absolutely.
That was the whole intent of this. I don't know. Are we talking about doing this on a building or a house?
These are all commercial structures.
The R2 is not.
James, what is considered masonry? What counts as under our definition of masonry?
Generally under the definition in our ordinance, masonry is something that's constructed out of individual units. So we're talking brick. We also consider 3-coat stucco typically to be masonry. One of the interpretations that is under the code is cementitious fiber cement board, so commonly known as hardy board, because of it's often been, as a practice, has been considered masonry for a number of years. So,
because I note that the cement fiber siding is in the conditions doesn't count as masonry.
And that was, yes, that was meant to, with that condition, was meant to get at true masonry. So, but
what is the plan for the other 75%?
Yeah, what were they going to do?
Yeah.
That's a bigger question.
Yeah.
At this point, because there have been the renderings and changes with that, it would be probably best for the applicant to answer that question.
Hi, James Thomas and Eric Holloway. What we wanted to do was a uniform design throughout the entire development, and it's probably what we visioned was looking something different from what is available in Conway. And the materials that we were going to use is, even when we look at the, for example, if you insist on a design, if you insist on the rules, there won't, Marriott Courtyard would not exist in Conway. And you could look around, for example, the development next to us, Red Robin doesn't have any masonry in it. And when you go across on Daywood, there are buildings there which is completely metal. And so it's not like you have enforced this on everyone. There are a lot of buildings that you're going to see in Conway which this has not been enforced. That's the first thing. And the second thing is, what we wanted to have is a uniform development, which was mostly white color, and we were mostly going to use EFS. The current EFS is far more energy efficient. They're probably twice more energy efficient than masonry. And our goal was to use that, primarily came in from that. And so if you enforce this, we are not going to paint bricks. You know, it's more of a moral decision for you than for me. We will come up with a way to comply the rules or go along with it. It would look different. Our goal was to create a destination center. We will move away from that to look like everything else in Conway. I cannot, I'm not powerful enough to kind of change any of your decision, but it's more of a moral decision for you. If you let few buildings in Conway have no masonry at all and enforce this on me.
James, when and why, and I'm not saying it's not true, when and why have we allowed buildings with no masonry in town?
Well, that is a hard question to answer.
No, it's not.
No.
And I stayed at a lot of Marriotts.
No, it's not.
There's a lot of brick on a lot of the Marriotts that I stayed at.
And some of this predates James.
But Red Robin is a good
So
example.
it's a combination of precedent, external factors influencing planning decisions. So it's the best way I can put it.
I never paid that much attention to Red Robin, but how in the world would Red Robin get by with none if that is the case? There's no precedent to have a Red Robin not build up to our standards.
Is it stucco there?
I just assumed we were
That's
doing
what it
this.
is, stucco, I think.
Aren't they isn't it stucco?
Red Robin itself, I'm not exactly
It
100%
looks like
sure
stucco.
what.
When you drive by.
What you said inside of our.
If it's more than likely it's not 3-coat stucco. 3-coat stucco is something you don't see very often. If it's a smooth surface, more than likely that is some form of EFS that has been constructed.
Brandon Rule, who is the head person of the Planning Commission,
That's an architect.
is an architect, and he voted in favor of this project as it was presented. So I
had a question. Is concrete blocks considered masonry?
Yes.
Yes.
It is.
Just saying,
What's
sure thing.
the disadvantage of using EFS? Can somebody?
I don't necessarily know, but I just know I'm not in favor
just-
of gutting
I'm not-
our
I'm not saying
regulations
you
in
need to
1
know. I'm
hour or
just trying to
15-minute
find out from
conversation. It sounds like we may have already gutted them if we're not enforcing it.
There's one of there obviously you will hear differing opinions on the use of EFS from a perspective of commonly what I understand in the building industry is it's often not a material that you use on the base of a structure because it can be easily damaged. One can come up and punch it and damage it that way. In essence, it is similar to styrofoam with coating on the outside of it. Now there have been numerous changes to the product over time, but it has issues with staining. If you drive around town, you see structures that have some level of staining at the top. That often in places where I see it used, I was talking to a planner in Northwest Arkansas. They typically only allow it to be used for accent and trim in some of their requirements in some of the cities up there. So,
James, do you see, this is more a philosophical question, not particular to this. Do you see a need to look over our design standards and come up with, I don't want to say broader because I don't necessarily want to add things, but to look at things like this, because it sounds to me that a lot of the reasons behind why these design standards were put in place was how the building would look and wear over time. Is that correct? That you just didn't want, I mean, that's the way I've always kind of interpreted it.
We didn't want a metal building. That's
Right.
correct. That's right.
So, to your point, are there other products now that weren't available 20 years ago that could be incorporated in terms of that look and appropriate wear and maintenance?
I mean, there are probably some materials that we could look at and examine. Honestly, if you're wanting my opinion as a professional planner, I think the current problem with the design standards is it is too easy to waive. There's a release valve that makes it easy to get out of it, and that's the difficulty with it. So,
No, that's an easy way not to waive it. No, not, what do you mean it's easy to get out of it?
But we have before.
yeah, well, in essence, you know, and I do not want to demean anyone or any history of anything, but typically with the design standards, for a modification, it requires approval of the planning director. And so in other places where I have worked, when there's a standard that you didn't want to ever have waived, it typically required either the highest standard, if you didn't want something waived, would be to require city council approval. So for instance, when I worked with the city of Cabot, they had gotten sued over ADA lawsuit relating to them waiving their sidewalk requirements. It became just a frequent, common thing. After that lawsuit, I think as part of the consent decree, they dedicated part of their property tax money to building sidewalks and made a waiver of the sidewalk requirements of city council. It required city council approval. That was one of the last times you ever had a sidewalk waived in that city ever again. So
should we look at doing, instead of telling people what they can't do or what they should do or what we want them to do, masonry, should we, with all the materials, the way they've changed over the years, should it be something different, like, hey, we don't want you to have metal buildings versus you got to have 50% masonry?
Again, that's a question of how you want the structures to look in town.
If you ask me, I mean, if you're going to put red brick, versus something that's going to be nicer and newer, then I'm going to choose the latter.
Kind of more modern looking,
More
more
modern.
up to date.
Yeah, I mean, it just depends on where it's at.
I mean, the answer I'll give to you on that, and this is kind of sidestepping it in a way. Lyndon Johnson, when he first got one of his first teaching jobs, was in rural Texas, and they asked him, and said, "Now, do you believe in evolution? Because we don't teach evolution here." And he said, "Well, I can teach it both ways." So, in essence, I'm saying you all decide what you want the buildings in town to look like, and I can enforce it.
I want to ask. Oh, sorry.
It just sounds like we met this. Go ahead. Yeah. Go ahead. Sorry.
I was just going to ask. So, looking at this diagram here, the bottom brick part right there, would that be sufficient? Is that 25%?
I'd have to review I have not reviewed that individual building. We have looked at some of the structures.
I'm just using that as an example. And so the other part would be the ephes, right?
That upper part more than likely would be ephes, correct?
Okay, and if this is the same standard that they want, I don't know what percentage it is. Somebody said no, somebody said yes.
That particular building was just the person that did the 3D drawing, he put that color on there. It really should just be a white EFS building, consistent with a lot of the other ones. So it just so happens to be that's the picture he brought up. So it shows that. So that does look like brick, but no. But one thing I would say is throughout, and I go to, like I said, I go to a lot of planning places, and there are a lot of different standards out there. It's usually quality materials. I'm from the city of Maumelle, and that's the main standard there is that you have 85% quality material on the structures, and they don't define necessarily what that quality material is, except for through certain architectural guidelines, so that it doesn't have a masonry requirement. And I don't see that in many cities throughout. But what I do notice is that there are different cultures that we all have in the United States, and different cultures see a gold standard with design. We all see it differently. There's many of us that think that brick is the gold standard, but what I see that there's a lot of cultures out there that look at EFS and stucco and think that is the best and cleanest and the gold standard and premium that you might see. And I do see a lot of new design go in that direction. You look at the new Starbucks, the new McDonald's, and a lot of them, they're all going that direction. And you're now seeing a lot of metal panels too, which are also very nice, and they're actually kind of expensive. We'll see. So I think that standard is coming as well. So I hope that we can do this. Here we have somebody that's putting a very large development in, wants to do a consistent look, something that's the gold standard to them, instead of being imposed a standard that they don't think looks as good when they're actually putting this big investment in. So I hope that you will see that this is not much of a concession, and that that's something that we can move forward with.
Well, again, a consistent look is 51% across the board. That's consistent too. Y'all remember when Neighborhood Market came to town, they wanted to put in a cheap building. We more or less told them, well, we don't necessarily need a cheap building. I remember the guy said, give me 2 minutes, walked in the hallway, came back, said, done.
Yeah.
So.
We don't go even as far as a lot of cities do around the country, because you'll see Lowe's in other states that look totally different than ours. You wouldn't even know it was a Lowe's just looking at the building. And I know when we put all that in, there was a lot of gruntleness going on because we were imposing more standards on the developers. But we could have even gone even further than what we did.
Well, we'll cut to it. I will make a motion to amend the condition number 8 to scratch 25% and make it 51%.
Okay, Mr. Grimes, is there a second to this?
Does that include the 3 conditions that were read into the record?
It looks like it's not going to have a second, so it doesn't matter.
Oh.
Mr. Grimes, your motion failed for lack of a second.
All right. Pandora's box.
I think we do need to look at our design standards again, since it's been a long time.
I do too, Mary. Thank
To
you.
look at more modern buildings, things like that.
I'm all
that
for
are
that
coming
too.
down
I'm all
the
for
pipe.
that. I'm all for that.
Because we are putting ourselves in a box maybe that's kind of something older that we need to kind of bring up. James, add that to your list of stuff to do.
In your spare time.
Yes, exactly.
We can take that up as soon as we get an assistant director.
Yeah, you've been working short-handed. And James, what have you been with us, 2 years? Has it been that long?
I think so. Longer.
About 2.5 years.
2.5 years, yeah. A lot of this predates you.
Mm-hmm.
We understand that, yeah. Thank you. Okay, council, we're back to, I need a motion to waive 3 readings if y'all want to proceed.
Moved.
Second.
Have a motion and a second to waive 3 readings. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Passes 8-0.
I make a motion for the adoption of the ordinance with the conditions listed and also the 3 additional that James had added.
Second.
Okay, we have a motion and a second to adopt this ordinance with the conditions and with the 3 that were added. Any further discussion? Mr. Garrett?
One sec.
Yes, sir.
I guess this is a big decision. And thinking about what Grimes is saying, going from 50 to 25, cutting it significantly, do we have any idea or any renderings of what it's going to look like, besides something that's obviously not what it's going to look like?
The renderings that we have gotten up to this point did not include brick, so they probably would not be accurate to
So this is a
display.
whole trustus. It won't look
Or
bad.
will you have to approve?
It'll come
Yeah,
back
so
to James.
so one of the conditions as part of this, this is essentially laying out the zoning plan for it. Each individual lot, as they're developed, will go through the development review process
Okay.
and be reviewed against the conditions that exist here. So
Okay, so
At that time.
them being able to just put 25% masonry and that's it is not the end all be all. It's got to be approved by you guys. Like, I mean, obviously we can't ask them to put more masonry, but
yeah,
gonna be
I mean,
approved.
each individual development plan would be reviewed by staff.
And if I remember correctly, you said, and then it would come back to us again, is that right?
No.
So it's up to you to decide what you want?
In accordance with.
Well, it's not. It's
whatever
based
the
on
rules
what you all are deciding. Basically, I'm the hands of execution to make sure that that's faithfully carried out.
I mean, obviously, Dr. Thomas is putting a huge investment in Conway. It's gonna look top notch. I'm sure it's gonna look better than we ever expected. I'm sure. At the end.
I mean, it will be a substantial development. It definitely will be a substantial
And he
development.
wants it to look nice. I mean, obviously,
Yeah,
their family has a major invested all this money into it.
absolutely.
So
Thank you, James. Mr. Garrett.
It's be ordinance 021-104. Ms. Mel,
Aye.
Mr. Jones,
Yes.
Ms. Smith,
yes,
Mr. Hawkins,
Yes.
Mr. Grimes,
No.
Mr. Ledbetter,
yes.
Mr. Pruitt,
No.
Ms. Isby.
Yes.
Passes 6-2. Mr. Hawkins.
Last item here, Mr. Mayor, is an ordinance to rezone 25.5 acres approximately along Bill Bell Lane and Stanley Russ Road. It presently is zoned A1. The requested zoning is to R1, and this was reviewed by the Planning Commission at, I wish y'all would put the dates on here again.
It was last
September
Monday week.
20, I'm sorry. I apologize. That's my fault. And it was voted on 8-0 to send this to City Council with a recommendation of approval. And we have an ordinance to read for this item. It's ordinance 021-105.
make a motion to waive 3 readings.
I have a motion, a second to waive 3 readings. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Passes 8-0.
I move for adoption of the ordinance.
Second.
I have a motion and a second to adopt this ordinance to rezone 25.45 acres along Bill Bell Lane from
There.
Stanley Russ Road from A1 to R1. Any further discussion? Mr. Shaw, I know you're disappointed you didn't get to speak.
No, I think we didn't.
It's okay.
We're good. Mr. Garrett. Pull the trigger.
Mr. Pruitt, Mr. Grimes,
Aye.
Ms. Mel,
Aye.
Ms. Smith,
Yes.
Mr. Ledbetter,
Yes.
Mr. Jones,
Yes.
Ms. Isby,
Yes.
Mr. Hawkins.
Yes.
Passes 8-0.
Thank you. Frank, yeah, before you leave, I need to talk to you about something. Not now, I'm gonna leave.
on the microphone, let's do it
No, it's personal.
I'll be here when you get finished.
Thank you.
Thank you for your time and consideration, but I really want to thank you for letting me bring this back in less than a year. Much appreciated. Thank you.
You're
Thank you,
welcome.
Frank.
Thanks, Frank.
Thank you, Mr. Hawkins.
Yes, sir.
Next, we have the Public Safety Committee and the last item on the agenda. I know y'all are used to seeing Mr. April, Chief Winter, coming up. Tonight, we have Mr. November, who is Assistant Chief Bill Keithley.
You knew that was going to come back and get you.
By the way, Chief Winter's zooming and watching us like
Yeah, Bill Keithley was actually the first firefighter that Ledbetter and I hired. And I think it was on Ledbetter's recommendation, so I still hadn't gotten over that.
Sometimes you just get one.
I know.
Yes, sir, Mr. Mayor. So Chief Winter just wants to accept this donation from Centennial Bank for us to buy some AEDs for the department.
Okay, for those that are watching on TV, AED is automated external defibrillators, which are true lifesavers. Count.
Motion to waive 3 readings.
Second.
I have a motion and a second to waive 3 readings. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Passes 8-0.
Make a
Motion for the adoption of the ordinance.
second.
We have a-
106.
We have a motion and a second to adopt this ordinance. Any further discussion? Mr. Garrett.
Mr. Ledbetter,
Yes.
Mr. Grimes?
Aye.
Ms. Smith?
Yes.
Ms. Isby? Ms. Isby?
Yes.
Mr. Pruitt? Mr. Jones?
Yes.
Ms. Mel?
Aye.
Mr. Hawkins?
Yes.
All righty. That passes 8-0. That's all we have tonight, council. This is a reminder, we have a special city council meeting scheduled for October the 5th at 5:30 PM here to discuss the Community and Aquatic Center with Craft and Toll. And that's all the business I have for tonight.
One more thing.
Yes, sir.
So I'm going to use this time to make my official resignation from the council. This is my last council meeting. I'll be moving outside of Ward 2. So will no longer be able to continue my duties as the council. And I just want to say to everybody here, thank you so much. I've learned so much from every single one of you over these last 10, 12 years. And it's been an extremely fun ride. I know that Theo and I have fought a lot, but I love you like a brother, man. I do. I do. I love it that we can always argue and then we always walk out there and talk as soon as we get done. So I just want to say thank all of you guys. Conway's been fantastic to me. It's given me an education, given me a family, given me jobs, allowed me to give back to the community. And it's been a very, very fun ride. And if you guys ever need help with anything, don't call me, okay? So anyway, I love you guys.
I'll let you. Thank you, Wes. You know how Felicia can pull off something at the last minute. This is something we got for you, Wes. It says honoring Alderman Wesley Pruitt in recognition for your years of dedicated service, guidance, and leadership to the city of Conway. We appreciate your passion and unconditional commitment to making our city a better place. Thank you for your faithful years of service to Conway community. City Council member 2012 to 2021. And I've got to say this, and all of you can say something, Wes, personally, too. The thing I've enjoyed about Wes, first is his love for Conway and wanting to get out. But Wes and I may not know, but we've butted heads a time or two, and he's a lot like Ledbetter, in that Ledbetter and me can get red-faced mad at each other, in 2 hours we're over it. Wes and I can get down and dirty with each other, and within 2 hours we're like, okay, what's the next business? So yeah, so you're one of those guys that don't hold grudges, Wes, and I appreciate that. You've been an asset to Conway. So.
I just want to say, apparently you hadn't been into it with as much as I have. He didn't even mention your name.
I've been on longer than me and Bart have.
Yeah.
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, well, since we have not closed the meeting, council, it is up to you. My recommendation is that we move to executive session and figure out what our next step is moving forward.
So moved.
Okay. Yes, sir.
I need 1 minute to talk to this.
You really think you can talk to Frank in 1 minute?
I'm going to talk. He's not going to talk.
All right. All in favor, say aye. Aye. Any opposed? Passes 8-0. Or you may leave you out some of my conversation. You got to have somebody. The council will come back in 2 weeks and go into executive session and discuss that again. Any of you that live in Ward 2 that are interested in filling this position, if you would, contact the mayor's office at 450-6110 and give your name and information to Miss Felicia Rogers. With that, I'll take a motion to adjourn. We're adjourned.